Good morning and welcome to the Modern Day MoBro. I'm very excited for today's episode. We're going to be talking with a dear friend of mine. His name is Ethan McRae. Ethan and I have been friends since high school when he moved to Thatcher. He's cousins with my best friend, Larry Hunt. Shout out to Larry Hunt. Happy birthday yesterday. We're very excited for you. Ethan is a lawyer practicing in the Phoenix Valley. And as we were going through our elections over the last couple of weeks, I found his perspectives very interesting and healthy and so I kind of wanted to talk with him again about it, and we'll probably go over this in the chat, but we'll go there once he gets in here. I'm gonna let him in here. Ethan, good morning.
How's it going, Tanner?
Hey, welcome to the podcast, man. Podcast, YouTube series, whatever this is.
I'm happy to be here.
We're very excited to talk with you today. I was just telling our viewers that 2 weeks ago, last week, we were talking about the elections, and I thought that you had some very good perspectives on where we were at as a country, what was going on. For me, I know I was very all in on Carrie Lake at the time, and you were like, hey, maybe we need to press pause and look at what's going on here and take a deeper dive on what our modern day politicians are doing, and is this good or is this bad? And so kind of before we go into that, I did, just because I'm not super well versed in politics, I'm not involved in that. And
oh, you're more versed than you think you are.
well, that's probably true, but either way. And so I was wondering if you'd be willing to kind of share with us what we should be expecting from our new regime of leaders, and like what should I be looking for from them to know if, like, are you doing what you said you were gonna do, or what's
That's and quite frankly, this whole last couple of weeks has just been nuts, because we went from thinking that everything was going to go Republican to realizing that, I mean, a few things went Republican, but really not like we were thinking. And so it's the expectations, I think, have flipped a little bit, because essentially in a democracy, when people can vote who they want, oftentimes they're voting against what they don't like in power. And so Joe Biden, no one likes him. Democrats don't like him. Republicans don't like him. Like, nobody wants him to run in 2024. And yet we still saw, nobody voting against him, which makes me realize that he's not what people are voting for and against. For the first time ever, we've had Democrats have a singular issue that they can rally around. Abortion was huge. And quite frankly, most Republicans don't want an all-out abortion ban. I don't think there's not very many that want that, but a lot of the
I don't know any. Like,
yeah.
and we run in Republican circles, and while I'm not saying that I'm pro, like, let's legalize all abortion, I'm also not like, let's cut it all out. So absolutely.
Exactly. And so I think that we saw Democrats definitely kind of have a better rallying cry, but also to limit it at abortion is overly simplistic, I think. It also, I think, comes down to Trump a lot. And I think that there are a lot of reasons why people like Trump. Have you had a chance to listen to Dave Chappelle's SNL monologue?
No, I guess I need to.
You'll have to go check that out. It was from like last week. And he gives a lot to chew on. It's been pretty controversial because he tackles the anti-Semitism, but he also tackles Trump, and he lives in Ohio, amongst what he calls the poor whites. And he says that he understands where they're coming from, because Trump is essentially like the guy that said, I know that the system's rigged because I use it. And Chappelle, he was like the guy that came out of the big white mansion and said, everything that you guys think is going on in there is true, and then goes back in. Like, and so there's definitely an appeal because he's, you know, he's honest in a lot of ways that other people aren't. And so but at the same time, he's overstayed his welcome,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
especially amongst moderates. Um, I again, like I said, I think from a policy standpoint, like some of it's good, some of it's bad, just like any other politician.
Yeah.
Um, and again, from that standpoint, I understand why some people vote for him and some people don't. But he's reached a pop culture height that's just, you know, it's insane. It's like the wildest.
It's a whole ridiculous thing. Yeah, for sure.
And so it really is boiling down to like we have this rallying cry around abortion. We have Trump trying to back a ton of candidates, and I think that that's where Carrie Lake has kind of run into a problem. Is that she absolutely locked down tight, you know, the Trump supporter,
Yeah, she was
and
all in on that
yeah,
in a
and
state that lost Trump, which is
exactly.
interesting.
And so I think that what she thought was that, you know, Trump pretty easily won Arizona in 2016, and so all she needed to do was to get every person that voted for Trump in 2016 to show up and vote for her.
Yeah.
But I don't think that she understood that the zeitgeist had changed quite a lot, you know, since that time.
Yeah.
And even I think that more than just up through like the 2020 election, I think that it's been all the stuff that's happened since then.
Yeah.
The election denial is it's a lot of things, but all it really does is make people hate politics all that much more.
Yeah.
Like whether it be based in something or not based in something, people don't want to have to question like election results every time, especially if there's not some, you know, flagrant, you know, obvious
Well,
fraud going.
and that's one of those things that's interesting is that because of these accusations and stuff like that, it makes me hate politics more, but it also makes me feel like I have to pay attention that much more. It's like now I have
Right.
to watch this because
And
I don't know
and
that I
no
can trust this.
right. And nobody really wants to have to pay attention to how the sausage is being made that much more intently. It's
Yeah.
like we're zooming in on like the sinews getting ground up. And nobody wants that. And so as long as there's not, you know, this you know, bold faced fraud going on, I don't think anybody wants to have to deal with, you know, election denials. Um, and I think that it's both dangerous that people don't want that and a good thing because it means that they trust the system enough to elect people
Yeah.
and enough to actually show up and vote for who they want. But, you know, if there ever does come a time where there truly is something, you know, really heinous going on behind the scenes, like we might run into some trouble at that point.
Yeah.
So
Well,
it's
that's one of the like that's one of the funny things about what Trump and them did, where they were like 6 months in advance calling election fraud. Like that's so ridiculous, guys. Like you're calling this before it's even happened.
yeah, and you're the ones in charge. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, if you're really in charge doing the things that you say, you know, do something about it. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
and so I don't think that I think that election fraud does exist. Do I think that it exists on a level that it's, you know, actually affecting the results of any of these races? Not really.
Yeah.
Um, so it's
I
just kind of
totally
like,
agree with you, by the way, on that. That 100%.
and so I really think that Carrie Lake missed the mark on that. And I think that Katie Hobbs was really smart in the way she ran her campaign and not engaging with it. I know that we've had this discussion before on
Yeah.
her not debating, and it is a weak stance, but at the same time, it prevents any kind of disasters from going down. Like Katie Hobbs was far and away just, you know, a steady hand through this whole thing.
Yeah.
Um, is she, you know, amazing? Is she like, you know, this candidate that I want to go campaign for? No, not at all.
Yeah.
But is she the right kind of boring that like I can actually, you know, vote for with a little bit of confidence? Sure. And
And I
that's
think that's something worth mentioning. I really like that phrasing they used of the right kind of boring. I think
Uh-huh.
that like Donald Trump ran as a rock star,
Hmm.
and Carrie Lake was running as a rock star. And and while I want strong leaders, there's also an aspect of I also want like a level-headed leader.
Yeah.
That's worth mentioning as well.
And and I think that that's why like Barack Obama is so beloved, is because to his supporters he's both things.
Yeah,
He's that steady hand and a rock star.
yeah,
Now Trump is a much bigger rock star with a much less steady hand,
yeah,
um, and it's just kind of a, and then like Mitt Romney was probably a little bit too, wasn't quite enough of a rock star
yeah,
to
yeah.
to really pull anybody. Um, and then Hillary, I don't even know. So,
So,
but yeah, I think that going forward, people are going to realize that having, a popular following, like kind of appealing to that populism
yeah,
is important, but you can't go all in on that. Like you have to have something else there. Um, and so it's gonna be interesting to see what happens going forward. The other thing that fascinates me is we love to shift directions back and forth.
yeah,
Um, and without a major shift in direction at this midterms, um, I think that it's setting up an anything goes in 2024. Um, Especially because we have a very unpopular president who is just getting further into his 80s every day.
right?
And there's no heir apparent. His vice president is not a great candidate.
No,
Um,
not at all. Please
I'm
no, don't die.
yeah, his
That's it's like if he goes, we're only in worse hands.
yeah, it's just kind of one of those things. Like it's insurance, I guess. Um, I mean, it's his Secretary of Transportation that people are giving the most buzz with Pete Buttigieg.
Yeah,
Like that's just not. I mean, it's an interesting situation over there. And then Ron DeSantis, I think, is learning that there's that balance between rock star and level hand.
yeah,
Um, but 2 years is a long time to kind of keep that, you know, keep
yeah.
that momentum. Um, so it's just I have no idea what's going to happen. Um, but I feel like the energy, the zeitgeist is definitely kind of changing, and I'm
Yeah,
hoping that we're leveling out a little bit, learning that the populism is a thing that you always have to consider, but also understanding that it's not everything. Um,
right.
so I'm hopeful. I actually think that we're in a pretty decent spot for good things to happen, especially because the margins in the Senate and the House are both so slim that I don't think that a true gridlock is ever going to happen.
Yeah,
Um, enough there's enough, you know, kind of grind and opposition that nothing stupid's going to happen either. Um, so I would be surprised by both, a government shutdown and
yeah.
anything dramatic happening. Um, which is kind of where I like my government. Like, you know, it
Don't do
running
dramatic things. Yeah,
it running correctly with nothing dramatic happening. So
yeah. That's
so
fair.
yeah, I think that we're in honestly a very hopeful spot. Um, the other wild card though is Trump's candidacy yesterday, and my biggest fear is that we don't get an accurate kind of consideration for what people want just because he split. Like if he runs as an independent, he doesn't get the Republican nomination.
Yeah,
He's going to split the Republican vote so that whoever the Democrat may be is going to just
he's just gonna
like
run. Yeah,
walk right in. Um, and so to me, that's kind of the worst case scenario.
yeah.
Um, Best case scenario is just kind of everybody turns from him and you know moves on. Like
Right.
under brought to the table, use whatever tools he left, and then yeah, just find something
Yeah,
new.
I thank you for changing the way our politics run, Donald Trump, but I really wish you weren't running right now. That's definitely where I'm at. It's like, oh, and he's trying to split the Republican Party right now, which the Republicans, man, they really need to figure out like what are we going to rally behind and what are we going to do?
Yeah,
And I really wish that we could see candidates that I could vote for rather than against.
100%.
Yeah.
And I yeah, I'm definitely with you there. Um,
But
but
I think that you gave me some optimistic hope about gridlock because you're right. It is. I mean, the Dems hold the Senate by one seat. Is
mhm.
that what it's not like they have a massive majority over there, and so
And
it,
Kirsten Sinema, I think is I think that she's hitting that rock star level-handed level that I like to see. Even
yeah,
though I don't agree with all of her policy, I think she's great because she's not going to just she doesn't let things slide. She knows that the margin's thin, um, and that if anything too crazy is going to happen, like she doesn't want to see it. And so it's kind of just one of those things where, and if it's not her, it's going to be somebody else.
yeah.
Like there's always going to be somebody like in that position when margins are this thin.
So we've we've been going for about 10 minutes now, and just for a couple minutes, what are your thoughts on how do we've got a very divided country right now as far as hard right, hard left. How do we find a middle ground, and what do we make that? Like how do we fix this ship?
So I that's a really big question.
Yeah.
First off, I think that to a certain degree, what's happening is actually like we're in that.
Yeah.
Um, we Politics historically have actually swung to extremes and then come back, and
Okay.
I mean you can see that like as a pattern that just kind of cycles through.
Yeah.
Um, I mean to the point where you look at like the FDR and the New Deal, like and how left and progressive those policies were, and how that they were very popular, but then a
Yeah.
lot tightened back up over World War II and going into the 50s, and by the 1963 election or the 1960 election, um, I mean the platforms were not that different between the Republicans and Democrats.
Yeah.
I mean you still had a progressive left and a conservative right, but like the platforms themselves are not extreme. Um, and then as we've gone along, pretty much since then things have gotten a lot more polarized.
Yeah.
Um, and so it's I don't think that this level of animosity can can persist without something more dramatic happening. And
Yeah.
quite frankly, I feel like the midterms that we just had are signaling that pushing further and further into the dramatic is not what people
It's
want.
not going to win over votes for you.
And I don't think anybody like can you imagine a normal person like signing up to go fight in a civil war like right now? Like
No.
we
No.
don't have it in us. We simply do not have it in us. And nobody wants to do it. Everybody knows that we've been there and we've done that. Nobody wants that.
Well,
And
and on
so
top of that, demographically, it just there's not like a dividing line. It's rural versus
cities,
big city, but it's
100%.
they're throughout the whole U.S. Like your Civil War would be like within every state. Like it doesn't make sense.
It would be very weird. So I don't think that I don't think anybody wants the polarization that we have, except for the very, very farthest, you know,
Yeah,
pockets of people. And and quite honestly, that's what made me hopeful this last week is that instead of this wave of more Trump backed far right people, like it really was a lot of much more moderate candidates being elected.
yeah,
Um, so I'm hoping that this is signaling kind of the turning point back from the very farthest polarization that we're going to reach. And don't get me wrong, there's always going to be people that are pushing farther and farther. And I
yeah.
think because of the internet and just the age we live in, those people are always going to have a much stronger voice going forward. But I think that people are going to understand that just because we hear it and we see it a lot more doesn't mean that like those people have always been there. Like those people
Yeah.
will always be there. It's just we'll be better at ignoring them.
Let's just ignore crazy when we hear crazy, even though it's being screamed.
Exactly, because that's what the internet's allowed. Is it's
Yeah,
allowed for absolute insanity to be, you know, put on the same wavelength as normalcy,
yeah.
and people are just trying to figure that out. Like I think we're hopefully getting there. It might take a I might be wrong. This might not be the turning point, but I think that eventually we'll get there. Because again, people don't want to have to go sign up and,
No, we definitely don't want to go and this is
don't want to leave
civil war is good. It's
in,
not good for
Los
anyone.
Yeah.
No, absolutely not. Well, Ethan, I really appreciate your perspectives on this. You're a breath of fresh air and kind of a stabilizing perspective that I think is really needed.
Well, I'm happy to do it, and I'm always happy to talk politics with you, Tanner.
Hey, I'm sure that between now and 2024, we are going to have some political stuff, and I'm looking forward to having you on again. So
I'll look forward to it.
Thank you so much. Yeah. So when are you running for president?
I always said 2044, but the craziness would definitely have to die down a little bit more.
All right, well, you have my vote, man.
Okay.
Thank you so much. You have a great morning.
Thanks, you too. Have a good one.